What's up, boys and girls? Lambo here, and today I'm gonna take a look at the 3 new maps that we got after a lot of feedback that we really do want new maps. Blizzard has graced us with 3 new maps that are replacing Submarine Death Around Pillars, which were in the Mappool forever, basically. And those 3 maps are called 2000 Atmospheres LE, Beckett Industries LE, and Blackburn LE. So I'm gonna take a look at them. I have not looked at them whatsoever yet, not even on the picture, so this is my very first impressions today. I'm gonna try to figure out how good these are in specific matchups. And I'm gonna just tell you guys my first impressions. First of all, I'm gonna talk a little bit about, since we're just loading into a game, and how good the maps were that these maps are replacing, which I think the last season map was relatively balanced. So they need to do a similar job compared to the maps that they replace. First of all, I'm gonna test all of them with a 12 pool so I can know the exact rush distances. So, whoops. Okay. Submarine obviously was a map that is very good for Terran against Zerg and good for Zerg against Protoss. Like one of the very short maps. I'm sure one of these maps is going to be very short. This one, for example, looks not enough. Let's see. This is probably second base. Already I noticed that the third base is relatively far away on this map, but yeah, it's probably going to be this one for Zerg. It's a linear base, not a triangle base. And you expand away from your opponents compared to this one, which expands towards them in a relatively straight path, I guess. So I'm just trying to micro my drones semi-well. I just want to see when the Zerglings arrive. This is why I'm not zooming around the map yet. Okay, here come the Lings, and I just want to know when the Lings arrive here. Okay, other than that, let's take a look at the map. So this is our natural, this is, I believe, our third base against Terran. This might be our fourth, maybe this, we'll see. Maybe against Terran, this would be our third, actually. I think against Terran, expanding forward very often proves to be a good idea. So this could be a third against Terran, this might be a third against Protoss, but I think against Terran you can expand like this, probably. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's take the path that our Lings are taking. Okay, so the map itself looks relatively short, but there is still a little bit of an S that the Zerglings need to run. It's relatively straightforward though. Let's see when they arrive. 1:54. Okay, so we had the good 12 pool spawn, which means this is a little bit faster, slightly faster than some of the old maps like Romanticide or Oxide, but just slightly. It's a little bit longer than, like slightly longer than Jagannatha, especially if you take the speed zones. Definitely longer than Lightshell and Submarine. It's a medium-sized map. Let's take a look at how easy it would be to attack the third bases. So as I said before, the third base is really far away. So just imagine, as a Protoss player, right, you're gonna take this as a third pretty much always. Do I not have an Overlord pillar here? Is this a high ground? Okay, it looks like a high ground. Let's just assume that this is a high ground. Either way, high ground next to geysers, which is fine, but there's also that airspace here next to geysers that you can take. I hope this is a high ground. The third base is really far away, which usually is a little bit annoying for Zerg in the early game. In the very early game against Hellion Reaper, of course, but also against the Adepts. If you get your natural block, the Adepts will have a lot of space to maneuver around, which you need to cover. Also against Glaives, you want to connect your bases, and in the new school of ZVP, Zergs don't go Cryptomorphers at the third base anymore, which means you might struggle connecting the bases, but it should be fine. It looks like a light shade, linear base distance third base, around the same, which is also relatively far away. The map looks good if you want to attack into your opponent, especially if you kill these rocks. You can come from 2 sides, and the going around here to set up this round doesn't take too long. So if you're here and you realize, okay, let me readjust and let me go around here with some units, you can come from these 2 sides. Also here, if you kill these rocks, that's fine. If you don't kill any of the rocks, it seems relatively hard to attack into, but overall fine. So first 3 bases, slightly hard to take. Let's take a look at the fourth. So since we're already on the topic of ZVP, let's see how hard it would be for a Protoss to take a fourth. I assume they would take this one, could also take this one. Actually, maybe they would take the forward one. This doesn't have a huge concave to attack it, especially if they like semi-wall. For example, let's say there's a nexus here, I put a couple of gateways here. It's gonna be relatively hard to attack into this one. Actually, this one seems slightly more open. Yeah, I actually think they're gonna take this one as a forward base. So first forward base is relatively easy to set up, I think, for Protoss. Especially this seems like a oxide-ish scenario where you expand towards in linear fashion as a Protoss, and then you take the fourth below your main base or in a triangle setup, and then you kind of just wall here next to the rocks, and then it should be relatively easy to hold. This also seems like a decent enough swarm host map. Decent swarm host map. Let's see how good it is for Void Race. There's not an insane amount of dead airspace around. This is annoying, especially if you take this as a forward base or as a third against Protoss. Because the War Prism from this can go into 3 different sides. So if you, especially if you play like Hydra Link Bane and you have your Hydras out of position, it might be very annoying. You need to keep a lot at home. Yeah, other than that, okay, there's a rich gas here. I do not think this base will be taken very often, since it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Also right next to Watchtower. There are Watchtowers. Let's see how much they see. So I think ZVP, this map will play out maybe mostly similar to Oxide if I had to pick any of the other maps in the map pool right now. So yeah, I think this one will be played out very similar to Oxide. So it looks like a fine map for Zerg. Not incredibly broken either way. I think the third base will be harder to hold than on Oxide though, by quite a bit. For TOS, so maybe slightly better than Oxide for Zerg. Against Terran, now is the question. Usually I would need to think about this a little bit longer. This is literally just the first time of me seeing it. I do believe we could take this as a forward base. This seems very annoying though to deal with. But yeah, this is the Reaper thing. So I'm assuming we're gonna take this as a third and this as a fourth, and the Koreans will always take this as a third without even thinking too much about it. But if you take this as a third, I think you need this as a fourth, because getting creep here, which is what you need if you want to hold these bases, it's gonna be very rough, because there might this is a good tank spot. You can have put tanks here. Obviously if you take this as a third, their tank push could come here, but you need to remember that this is longer distance and running like this. We also gotta consider that Terran probably might want to expand forward. Maybe if you take this base, they might expand here. The map looks, if they take this base, it looks okay-ish for Roach. If they take this base, not as much. Yeah, it looks like a fine map. We also have a decent amount of bases, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, okay, so if this is kind of just a half base, but if we count this one, it's 8, so it's a decent amount of bases, which is good for Zurich. I think the six bases favors the other races, because Zurich kind of runs out of momentum in the late mid game, especially if you play against Terran. Also against Protoss, it makes it a little bit easier to split the map. So maps like Oxide, where you only have 6 bases, kind of don't favor Zerg. So I think this map looks fine. It looks relatively balanced to me. Yeah, I don't have too strong opinions. Obviously, I might do another video about this when I played a bunch on them, but this map seems good so far. A good start. Let's check this one. Beckett Industries LE. Again, we're gonna test it at first with the 12 pool. I didn't really talk too much about ZVZ on the maps. This one was looked really good for Mutas, if you can get Mutas. I'm not sure if it looked like Mutas was safe on that map, because I think the rush distance overall seemed relatively short. Third base was relatively far away as well. So maybe like all-ins would be good on ZVZ, like Ling Bane pressure seemed very strong on the last map, but let's take a look at this one. 1, 2, 3, we're again gonna test with a 12 pool. I didn't really micro my drones properly. And I hate when maps have this. Like a mineral patch where the drone walks wrong sometimes. Yeah, that happens sometimes. Again, I'm just gonna micro for a little bit, and then we're gonna zoom around the map and take a look at it. Usually I always put a maps command, because people ask me every single time there's a new map pool. People ask me in my chat 1,000 times if what my opinion is on the new maps, and usually I just link them. You got Jabay that You baited, but this time I'm actually gonna make a real one, so we'll see if anyone actually clicks on the link. Yeah, this drone mining wrong is really triggering me. This was also the case on some old maps where we had to put the spawning pool here. So this wouldn't keep happening. Alright. This map looks very short to me. Because it's relatively straight. These are speed zones as well, I believe. Because they're green, right?
Not enough minerals.
Yes.
More minerals required.
Oh my god, this map might be extremely short. Rush distance wise. Oh, this is shorter than submarine, isn't it?
Game
150? This map is shorter than submarine. I have the bad spawn. Oh. 150, really?
Game.
This is a cool first map in DVD, guys. I can already tell you that much. If you wanna be safe against 12 full, you gotta go pool first on this one, I believe. Especially if you get the bottom spawn like I did. It's also a potential 12 pool spine crawler rush because the spine crawlers connect with the low ground, so this is gonna be a blind map, that's for sure. I mean, this is just the replacement for a submarine. Not sure why they always need to put a map like this into the map pool, but... Okay, let's take a look at... let's zoom around a little bit. So this third base is closer than this one, but this one is more forward. Like, I'm on this map now for 2 minutes. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be an instant veto for a lot of Zerg players. It looks terrible against Terran. Like, really, really bad. So against... yeah, I'm not even sure. I think you take this base. I think you take this base as a third, and then... this one as a... I'm not sure yet which bases you would even take against Terran, theoretically. But this map does not look that great. There's also this dead airspace here, which most maps have nowadays, but this one is huge as well, which is very annoying. For Zerg, yeah, mostly just the rush distance makes this map seem very bad. Another thing that's just really bad for Zerg is that the entrance of the run by is like in a straight line. So if a Terran has one Widow Mine here to spot for run bys or a Marine, or like let's say they will open Banshee pretty much every game on this map, similar to Submarine. They AFK a Banshee here, like just here, right? And this covers this entrance entirely. So if they have a Banshee here and they just rally their units here, right? And they're ADREXing, which they're gonna be doing a lot, that much I can guarantee you. They're safe against run bys, which is very annoying. Like this, the fact that there's only this entrance, like you can put your Banshee here and then you have like a 5-second warning to lift your depot and get your units into position. That's not good for Zerg. On top of that, the fact that this map is extremely short. The one good thing is that you can expand away from your opponent if you take this as a fort. This is also not necessarily that much closer to him, but I mean, this looks like an insane tank position. If you don't get creeper, this looks like an insane tank position. Maybe you have to take this as a third, but then these become insane tank positions. This is a veto, I think, against Terran, no matter what. Considering the Mappool, what else is in it? Oxide is the other veto, so this, yeah, basically will replace Submarine. I hope the other map is not also good for Terran, that would really suck. Let's see, against Protoss. Usually these maps against Protoss are very hard in the early game. So if the Protoss, for example on Submarine or Lightshade, if they go for Glaives, it's harder to hold in on other maps because it arrives earlier. But then afterwards, first of all they go Glaives, which isn't great. But against all the Stargate builds, Queen Walks are very strong on a map like this. Like the Queens with the speed zones, you're gonna have creep here and the Queens will just walk over here very, very fast, so you can go for high drone count Queen Walks against Stargate builds, which are more or less broken, I think, on this map, similar to Submarine. So you're not sure how legit Stargate is on a map like this, or how easy it is to go Stargate. Obviously, defending the first two adepts, it's going to be a lot of adept YOLOs, a lot of Glaives, which might be a little bit harder to defend, but later on this map seems fine for Zerg against Protoss. So this is probably a Protoss veto in ZVP and a Zerg veto in ZVT. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bases per player, which is similar to Submarine, also really bad. These bases also are this base especially is very far away from the rest, so it seems very hard to defend. Yeah, this map is just not good for Zerg, I think, against Terran, and it's good for aggressive Zergs against Protoss, which most Zergs are nowadays, right? That's the second one. Let's take a look at Blackburn, which seems to be a spawning close by air map. Usually the close by air spawning maps I don't really like for Zerg. Because the air rush distance is usually what matters in the early game for the opposing races, because they usually open with some starport, right? All the normal openers, and like medevac openers, liberator openers, banshees, they all just arrive sooner. Whereas the good thing about it is that usually you will be able to expand away from your opponent as a Zerg, especially against Terran. That's a good thing. These maps usually also favor 8-vex, especially if they're short, which this map looks a little bit shorter than Golden Wall. Okay, we're gonna test out the rush distance again. Third base, fourth base.
More minerals required.
No gaps in between those minerals, that's why it looks so small, at least to me. This is a gold base, but you can't mine from it. So against Protoss, this will be a base. Against Terran, this will not be a base. Against Terran, this is probably the fourth. Unless we want to expand forward early on. Let's see, the Hellion rotations, if you expand forward... If you can... wait, you can walk through here. Okay, let's focus on the 12 pool and then we're going to take a look at the map again. So the other 4 maps that are still left in the map pool is Jagannatha, which is good against Terran. It's like a decent map against Protoss, like a middle map against Protoss. So we have one that's good for it, Zerg against Terran. Then we have one that's bad for Zerg against Terran, which is Oxide. Then we have Lightshade, which is slightly good for Zerg against Terran. It's probably the best map against Protoss, I would say, together with Submarine. Or now it will be the best map, so it's good against Protoss. Then we have Oxide, which is, I think, bad against both Terran and Protoss for Zerg. Much more so against Terran than against Protoss. And Romancide, which is really bad against Protoss, and a middle map against Terran, like an evenish map against Terran. So this is what we're left with.
Successful.
And we gotta replace Death Warrior, which is a good Protoss map. Submarine, which is a good Terran map. And Pillars, which Pillars I think was like a very even map. Okay, now I didn't pay attention, so I gotta rewind for a second. This map, obviously the spawn positions for 12 pool don't matter. That's actually relatively early. I would hit the hatchery at 54. So very similar, or around the same timing as the first map that we checked. So since this is a relatively short rush distance actually, and I maybe could have even avoided going through the speed zone, so I'm gonna try that out in a second. Since it's a very short rush distance map, you will need to send your first overlord differently. You will need to send your, in ZVZ you will need to check for the 12 pools. That much I can tell you already, because this is a decent rush distance map. And Lyra spawns away from the natural, which means the Zerglings that you make here are gonna arrive relatively late. Which means even though this timing is not a very early one for 12 pool, this makes it slightly more viable. Okay, let me try and circumvent the slow zones. Let's see if I can do it a little bit faster. Yeah, 154, but this time with all 4 links were there. So that doesn't look like a terrible 12 pool map in ZVZ. Not like a great one, but not terrible either. So 12 pool is possible, Spine Rush theoretically possible, even though not great. But probably, if you put your spawning pool here, maybe the Spine Crawler will not cover the entirety of the low ground, right? Yeah. No matter where he puts it, I don't think you can shoot that drone where there's a slight gap here. So maybe you could put your spawning pool here and defend a drone pool like that. Either way, let's talk about the other matchups. So against Terran, I'm considering taking this forward base, but because if you don't, the forward base is terrible on this map. This has to be the forward base. You can't take a base where the Terran can shoot you behind the mineral line. That's just not an option. Even if these rocks are down. This is not defendable. Like, what if he tank pushes? You need to fight somewhere over here. And then because otherwise he will keep poking forward and killing your drone. So this has to be forward base. If you don't take this as a third. This map looks not good against Terran. Let's see. Let's just say we take 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is a fifth, maybe? There's rocks here. It's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bases just, and the other 2 bases are a joke. These middle bases are... This map does not look good for Zerg against Terran. I believe. That's my first impression. Like, these things maybe change if I figure something out, but just as a first impression, you against Terran, you think of how easy or where your forward base is positioned. How much the Hellions need to run is important for the early game. So let's say we take this as a third base. The Hellions will need to run around all the way like this. So it's good for early game because the Hellions need to do huge rotations, right? Huge rotations. Let's say our queens stand here. We know the Hellions are here because we have an Overlord here against Terran. And then that means we can go forward here with the queens. And then the Hellions need to either run all the way around this to try and deny creep spread here, which means we have free creep here and here. Or they run around all the way like this, which means we have free creep here and here, because you can spot all of that with the Overlords. So in early game, this looks good against Terran. But if you think about a little bit later on in the game, like this is a forward base. And then this forward base is easy to hold, right? You have 1, 2, 3, 4 easy bases. But that, at first, like in early Legacy 2, I thought every map that was super broken for Zerg when forward bases were easy to take. But you need to think about fifth base. Very often you can just play to deny a fifth base. Because with 3cc openers, you're set up for an early 4cc yourself. You don't need to don't need to deal that much economic damage to a Zerg. But if you keep him on 4 bases, if you force him into bad trades trying to defend his fifth base, that's usually enough. If you play a macro-oriented opener. Yeah, this is very open, which is necessary, otherwise this would be an insane Adrax map as well. Because obviously the rally is on the path where also his third base is, and straight towards my base, right? So I'm sure some Terrans are gonna try Adrax, but it doesn't look as great as on some of the other close-by air maps. So yeah, this looks to me bad against Terran. Let me think about it for a second. What if we take this as a third base? This looks a little bit too open at first because the Hellions can just run around the queens, which would really suck. So you can only take it if you make a lot of Zerglings. But this might be the way, because then you can actually take 5 bases, right? Like 1, 2, 3, and then you can go 4 and 5. And eventually 6 if you have Mutas out. Maybe you can take this eventually. If you have full map control, you can try taking this once the rocks are down. Actually, the rocks are not really that necessary. You can just walk around here. So maybe if you take this base, I'll still need to think about it. Against Protoss, let's swap matchups here for a second. The bases seem very open, but it's relatively close. I mean, the openness of the bases is not that much of an issue anymore because of Void Rays. So like on pillars, where you could get a massive concave, they now have super batteries. And they also have Void Rays, so the surface area helps for like queen attacks pretty much, but that's about it. There's no Mass Roach Ravager where or Hydra Bane attacks also are slightly better, but this kind of stuff is not supposed to work against the Void Ray builds. There's also a slow zone, I just realized. What if they drop here? Looks fine. It looks far enough away, but what if they start a tank push here? That looks kind of sketchy.
Forces under attack.
That should be fine. Let's check for high grounds. Let's see if this is a high ground. It should be. Yeah, so there are 2 high grounds here. This one is not a real high ground. Maybe if we put it right there, this would need to be tested out, obviously. If they can't spot it from here to here, I believe they should be able to. Maybe not actually, this seems relatively far away. But it's hard to tell. I think, so yeah, I think this is not a good map against Terran, and it should be a good map probably against Protoss, because gold bases usually favor Zergs. Not sure how easy it is to defend that. I'm not sure how it works against Void Rays, because Void Rays were not in the meta with Golden Wall yet. Can Void Rays shoot the drones without the queens being able to protect them, unless I need to run all the way around? That's a question. Because otherwise we could take this as a forward base, right? Obviously also stalk a Colossus from behind. There's a lot of things to consider, but this looks like an okay map, I guess. For Zerg against Protoss looks like a decent map for Swarmhost Nidus. Decent map, which is not very strong, obviously also because of Void Rays, but if there are no Void Rays, Swarmhost Nidus, which usually if there are no Void Rays, they go Colossus all in, so Swarmhost Nidus is not really a thing anymore. Either way, looks like a fine map against Protoss. It's always a little bit harder to tell. I need to realize exactly what Protoss will most likely do, and then I will take that into consideration and then decide how I like those maps. So let me take a look at all the maps again. So we have these 3 maps replacing Death Aura, Pillars, and Submarine, which I think one of these were good for Terran, the other 2 were middle maps. And against Protoss, one of them was good for Protoss, one good for Zerg, and one in the middle. And I think they put like this one. I cannot imagine this being a playable map against Terran, to be honest. Maybe I'm missing something, but this looks really terrible for Zerg. Against Terran specifically, likewise it's good against Protoss for aggressive purposes. So this basically replaces Submarine. And this seems like a medium map, so maybe let's call this a Pillars. Let's say that this is the replacement for Pillars, might seem fine. And then theoretically we're lacking a replacement for Death Aura. Now this, I'm not sure yet. It's harder for me to tell if it's good against Protoss than it is to tell if it's good against Terran, but I believe this will be good for Terran. So it's slightly better, this map might be slightly better for Terran than the last one. But we'll still have to see. Either way, those are my first impressions. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And obviously I will practice those maps on my stream, so you can make sure to tune into my stream today and in the near future. And yeah, if you guys like this content, let me know. Make sure to subscribe and click the bell and leave a comment and do all the other stuff to help me with the algorithm. Either way, thank you guys for watching and see you guys in the next video. Peace out.